Hi guys, it's Becky, and I have another project that I've been working on, well, thinking about for the last couple of weeks from the Beauty of Time box. This is the March 2023 Sam Speed box. And along with that, the bead box, you could also purchase some extras like some of these um, uh, sorry, these are 11 seed beads. They had some that would match the items that were in there or would accompany them, go well with them. And so I'm going to be using a couple of these for this project. One is the galvanized mint green 11 and the other are the hybrid natural Picasso 11 and they also had this Silversilk. You could get a little pack of 2 colors of the Silversilk Flatmesh, and this is the antique copper. And I've got on one end of it, I have a little tiara cast crimp end for the flat mesh, and I've got another one for the other end when we get to the end of this necklace, so I'll apply that then. But I went ahead and started it off with this this crimp end so I know where I'm ending, even though I may not know where I'm beginning. Does that? Yeah, that's where I'm ending, but I don't know where I'm beginning yet. That's going to be part of the planning process that we're going to go through real quick here. But the beads that I'm going to be using for this is I'm going to be using some of these top drilled lentils. You can see they've got the hole near the top of the lentil. And they have this really lovely finish on it, this Picasso finish. And then there are these other lentils that have a hole in the center. And so I'm going to be using both of these lentil beads in this project. And we're also going to grab these round 4mm mint green direct beads. And they are going to be part of our project as well. So let me get these out here in little piles for doing this. And what we're going to be doing is I've been playing around with bead weaving on flat mesh, mostly doing brick stitch, but I'm going to do a brick stitch, a line of brick stitch on part of this flat mesh, and then I'm going to use that as a base to do a little more bead weaving and attach some other beads and dangles as you go along here. Now you can attach beads and dangles and things to flat mesh without doing a brick stitch base because it's wire, and so you can put craft wire through the holes through it. You can put beading wire through the holes in here. You can do beading thread and all sorts of things. So it's something that is fairly easy to embellish. But this is what I'm doing today. Is I'm going to be doing a brick stitch border, and then I'm going to be attaching some little dangles of these beads as I go. All right, so planning this out, I left it uncut and I left one end undone because I want to use up, there's 18 of these lentil beads. That's the one I have the least amount of, so I want to use all of them for this necklace. And in my planning, a repeat of one of these lentils plus one of those lentil drops was about a ½ inch. So for all 18 of those, I'm going to need about 9 inches of space of this this flat mesh embellished, which would get me about there, that much. But I also want about 4 inches on the end for it to go around the back of my neck. So on one end, I've got 4 inches, and then I've got another 9 inches, because math, but I'm going to go ahead and give myself an extra inch to start this with, just because if I've got all the seed beads down and I go over 9 inches, I want to be able to have the seed beads down already and not have to add them. And if I come up short on my amount of seed beads that I am doing, I would like to know that, that's what I'm doing, I'm coming up short, and I can unpick the seed beads from the end because I'm not going to be finishing that end with the strand until after I finish the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here. I'm going to do a brick stitch all the way along here until I'm at my 4 inches to the end mark. And then I'm going to start doing my dangles all the way back here. So if I get here and I run out of my lentils and I still have a few seed beads brick stitched here, I can undo those so that it all matches and it's all even. So that's my plan with this. Now to do my bead weaving, I've got my wide angle needle here, and I've got some beading thread. Let me grab my beading thread. Okay, so let's see. I may use Wildfire for this, and this is the 0.15 millimeter Wildfire. I've also got dragon thread. All right, now I'm gonna use the Wildfire. And so I'm probably, before I get to the end of this, going to run out of thread, but you can always add thread in. You just tie it off and tie off the new bit from it. Where's my end? There it is. So I'm just getting a comfortable length cut off. It's about an arm length. Well, if I hold out my arm to the end and then I hold this other end out just a little bit, that's a comfortable enough length for me. Maybe 5 feet. I don't know. I'm just guesstimating. But we're going to get this started, and I'm going to start the brick stitching, and then I'm going to stop the video. Whoop. There it is. Boy, these are not things that you want to step on, by the way. The beading needles, because they are very bendy, and they will break off in your foot. All right. I may just edit this part out, actually, with me fumbling around. All right. So let's get our beading thread on here. Let's get started with this brick stitch. Now, these are small beads and small edges in this, so it's a little bit hard to see. If you want to see this technique that I'm going to be using here on bigger beads and flat mesh that has bigger holes, I am uploading a tutorial of me making earrings using this technique with brick stitching some beads to the edge, and I use 8/0s and a larger gauge flat mesh there that isn't actually available for purchase, but is really helpful for demonstration purposes. So let me remeasure this since I already, all right, so I want 14 inches. All right, that's where we're at. So I'm going to start it here. Let me zoom a little bit so it's easier for you to see. And so I'm going to go from the, I guess, the bottom, what's towards me on the flat mesh, up towards the top and come out by one of these bumps with my needle. And I'm going to want to leave 3 or 4 inches of tail thread, and I'm going to just leave that. I'm not going to do anything else with it. All right, so you can see these different bumps. I'm going to be sewing into these bumps in order to attach the seed beads to the edge. And so for the start, you always start with 2 seed beads, but for the rest of this, it will just be 1. And that's because I want 1 seed bead here where the thread is coming out, and then another seed bead sitting on top of the bump next to it. So I'm going to sew into the bump next to it. Actually sew into it and not pass above it. Come on, bump. All right. They're not quite sitting flat yet because we haven't gone up through the bottom of this one or the other one to help it sit flat. When you do, when you sew into the next bump, it will help it keep its place better. All right, so then I pick up 1 more seed bead and I sew into the bump next to this one. Right there. Right, and then I sew up through the bottom of that seed bead. And this is brick stitch. This is brick stitching these beads along the edge of this flat mesh. And so I'm going to continue doing this until I have 10 inches of brick stitch along this flat mesh. And when that is done, I will come back and we will turn around and start working the other way, adding our other embellishments to this, because you can use flat mesh as a chain basically in your jewelry designing, and it's really useful and versatile for that. But I want the flat mesh to kind of be front and center for this, and we're just going to be adding beads along the edges of it. You know, kind of like you can do sometimes with adding drops along a chain and have those drops hanging out that way. So I'm going to be doing that with this, and I think it's going to look really cool. And hopefully this is informative to let you know how to work with this medium. So I'm going to continue doing this, and I will go ahead and stop the video so you don't have to watch me fumbling around with this. I'm just doing it one more time for reinforcement's sake. All right, because repetition is good, especially if you're a visual learner, being able to see how things work. So all this is doing when you brick stitch it, by the way, is these threads, they link the each seed bead to the one next to it to keep it in that structural position, and then it's linked through the bottom to the brick stitch just with one swoop of the thing. Now, if you build brick stitch, instead of sewing through the loops here, you sew through the loops. If you're adding more beads to brick stitch to extend it out, you sew through these loops on the top to do the next level of brick stitch. But I'm not doing 2 levels, I'm just doing the 1 level. For this, we are going to be sewing through these beads when we attach our dangles. But they're going to give us a good solid foundation for that, to be able to attach those other beads to this flat mesh. Okay, I am ready to continue on with the next part of my necklace. So far I have stitched these seed beads for it's about 9.5 inches actually, from this end all the way to this end, and this is where I've ended. I'm leaving about 4 inches of flat mesh with its little attachment on the end, and I'm going to leave this there. This end is already done, and I'm going to continue this piece by working back across in this direction. So where I ended here, I have the thread coming out. Coming out of this last one, but it's not anchored on both sides of the bead. So I'm going to go around the bead and down into the flat mesh. And I'm going to sew into the same bump that I sewed into to sew this here, not into the next bump next to it, but down into this one, just so I can make sure that it's nice and anchored on that side. Let's get this sewn in here. Actually sewn into it, not between or under it. All right. And this helps just anchor this end bead here. All right, so the first dangle or embellishment that I'm going to add is going to be this center hole lentil bead, and it is about as wide as 3 of these seed beads. So in order for it to lay flat along all 3 of these, I want my thread to be coming out of this middle bead away from the flat mesh. And that's the direction that I'm going to be talking about when I do this, is away from or towards the flat mesh, because that's the way the holes are oriented. Not up or down, because it'll change depending on how you're looking at this. All right, so that's nice and solid on there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the lentil bead with my needle, and then I'm going to pick up one of these mint drucks and one of these 11 seed beads on the end, so it makes a little blurb like that. And then I'm going to push it down against the edge of this, because that's where it's going to stay. And then I'm going to sew back through the round bead and the lentil and this seed bead that it came out of. I am not going to sew back into this 11 on the end, because the 11 is going to be my anchor. This is what's going to hold this onto this necklace. All right, so sewing back through here, and that is attached. So that's the first bit that I'm adding for my attachment. Now I'm going to weave through these seed beads to the next part of this so that I can attach my top drilled lentil. So I'm going to go into this next seed bead away from the flat mesh, one into the next seed bead after that towards the flat mesh, two, and then in order for this to attach, I want to be going away from the flat mesh again, and this is 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, and that's the spacing between these, is 3 seed beads. And now I'm ready to attach my top drilled lentil. And to do that, I'm going to pick up 2 of these Picasso 11 seed beads, pick up the lentil with my needle, and then pick up 2 more of these Picasso seed beads. And then sew right back into this same 11 that this is coming out of. All right. And that gives me a nice little dangle from the edge of this flat mesh. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew out, in, and out. And I'm going to repeat this first drop here. So I'm going to pick up the center hole lentil, pick up my round bead, only one of them though, only one, and then pick up one of these Picasso 11 Push this down and sew back through those 2 and the 11 that we're coming out of. like this. Then I'm going to count 3 beads over again, out, away, towards, and away. And I'm going to do the top drilled lentil dangle again with 2 11/0s. The top hole lentil and 2 11/0s, and sewing right back into this 11/0 that I'm coming out of. And so I'm going to continue like this until I have run out of this kind of lentil, and then I'm going to sew 1 more of these on the edge so that they're bookending all of these. So I'm going to continue all along here until I get my last one sewn in, and then we will figure out from there if I'm going to need to undo some of these seed beads or not. I might not have to. I might. We'll find out. But this is how we're going to continue all the way along the rest of this. Okay, so here I am. I have completed all of my repeats all along here until I got over here to the end. And I just have 1 more dangle to attach. And it is, you recall I said I wanted this dangle to kind of bookend everything so that it matches here on the other end. So I actually have almost exactly the amount of seed beads as I should have. So that 9.5-ish inches of seed beads was exactly right for what I wanted. Good job me. I thought I was going to have a whole bunch extra that I was going to have to undo at the end, but apparently not. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my last little guy here with all his little friends, and we're going to pop him on there. And after we go back through here into this last one from the end, I'm going to take a look at what I have left on here, and I have one extra 11/0 on here than what I want to have. So I'm going to undo that. See, I did not tie off this end, so I can pull this out and also pull out that seed bead so that I just have these left. So I think what I'm going to do is take my needle and put it on the other end of this and bring this this thread through the flat mesh. This end, this is my short end, this is the end that I started with. So I'm going to take my needle off my long end. I'm going to pop it on here real quick. I say real quick, but then, you know, I'm going to fumble around with it for a little while because that's what we do. All right, so I pop that on here, and I'm going to just take it like I did with the other end to kind of anchor this last bead back through the same little loop on the side of the flat mesh that it originally went through to anchor that. All right, so here I am with these 2 ends of this strand, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie that in a knot because they are right next to each other. So I'm going to tie it. One. And then for the second pass, I'm going to do it around this twice for a surgeon's knot. I just feel like it's more secure. 2. All right, and then each end I'm going to just kind of weave through a little bit through a couple of these beads before I cut them off. And then we'll be ready to finish this. All right. My thread is getting caught on everything. Okay, so it's coming out of that one, so I'm going to bring it up through this one, next to it. And then down through that same one that it came out of the first time. And then up. And then down here. And that's just to get it the end a little further away from where the knot is, so that if there's any pressure put on the knot, it's not going to totally come undone. And then I can cut that. So let's cut that one. And then I'm going to do sort of the same thing with this end. Just going to move it away from where the knot is before I cut it. All right, and that's going this way. I'm going to bring it up through that one. Actually, why don't I bring it all the way out through here? No, that would be silly. I'm just going to bring it over here a little ways, just away from the knot where these two ends joined. All right, yeah, that's going to be good enough for me. Good enough for me. And then cut that end. And I've got a couple of ends. You can kind of see them here. So I'm just going to grab this just to burn it down a little bit, so I don't have frayed ends hanging out there. So now most of this is done. I got the hard part finished, and that is the bead weaving bit. And I need to finish the rest of this. And I want the other end to match this end, where I've got my flat mesh and my end cap pinched on there. I've got a lobster clasp and some jump rings that I'm going to be attaching for closures. But on this end, I'm going to want this to match. So I'm going to fold this over so that these two are at the same place. And then I'm going to follow my flat mesh along. And right at the end of this, that's where I'm going to cut, where are my wire cutters? I've got some flush cutters here. So I'm going to cut right here so that it's about the same length, right at the top of this, because it's going to be folded over inside of here. All right, so now I've got my excess out of the way. I want to finish this end of my necklace using this pinch bead cap. So I'm going to fold this end over, stick it inside of here, and then smush it. And you can use some glue too. I think it's holding just fine the way it is. I'm using some tweezer nose pliers. I get kind of a finer bend with some of my wire this way. I'm just going to fold this over on the end. Give that a slight smush so that it's nice and tight. Tight. And now I can put this into this end cap. And I'm also going to use these tweezers to smush it in there, because I think it needs it. They're tweezer nose pliers, I should say, not tweezers. Smush. push, push. Okay, now to make this secure, if you've got if you don't want to mess up the finish, I don't mind some tool marks on mine. You can see on that it left some. So I'm just going to use my regular chain noise pliers to do my smushing. But if you've got nylon jaw pliers, you can use that to do the smush. Or if you've got tools that have been dipped in like Tool Magic or something, that would also not leave as many marks. But I'm just smushing this flat. And there it is. It is secure. And now I can just attach my jump ring with a lobster clasp on one end and close this up. And then on the other end, I've got another jump ring. All right. And now this little dangle collar necklace is finished. Using Flatmesh, seed beads, and other beads from the Beauty of Time Sam's Bead Box. All done. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you learned something. Have a great weekend. Bye.